So this week, while studying and preparing to write your cause and effect essay, you took a look at chapter 14, which includes a few different exercises, a student sample, and I want to talk through those as well as showing you a few examples of essays from students of mine from prior semesters. And I want to start a little bit by talking about that picture on page 224. It baffles my mind, and I'm always surprised at how many students interpret the scene differently than I do and see a different chain of cause and event, cause and effect reactions that go on there. So I'm always interested to see what everyone else comes up with and how they explain the circumstances that would lead to this silvery whitish car being mounted on top of the little red sports car that is underneath of it. So I'm excited to see what you'll have to come up with for that. Alright, so in chapter 14, it discussed for you these different patterns for causal analysis, and the first two I went over already pretty in depth in the first videos, talking about choosing one cause and then exploring its multiple effects, or choosing one effect and then exploring its multiple causes. But if you were to have a situation where you had more of a domino effect and you wanted to discuss what's actually called a causal chain, it is possible to write your cause and effect essay in a way that you have a cause that leads to an effect, so cause 1 leads to effect 1. That effect in turn becomes its own cause for the next effect. And effect number 2 then becomes the cause for a third effect, and things continue to sort of spiral from there. And so if you find that that is the situation that you're in, given your topic and what you're exploring, that is also a perfectly acceptable way to build your cause and effect essay. It does, however, require very clear transitions so that as readers we don't get lost in what you're doing and in what exactly the relationship is among these different things that you're presenting to us. So just to be aware that there are actually 3 different patterns that you can choose from in structuring and organizing your cause and effect essay. Now, on page 227, you have an exercise that asks you to read through a selection and arrange the events in a causal chain. So this is one that does that third pattern where you have a cause which leads to an effect. That effect then becomes its own cause. And so we have the idea of folk societies. And as they solidified, they led to settlement in villages and more technological advances. These technological advances in turn become a cause for a surplus of food, which allows the feudal society to be established. That effect in turn becomes a cause. Because of the feudal society, we see a specialization of labor and we see an improved class structure. That effect again becomes now another cause. The improved class structure and the specialization of labor lead to irrigation systems and an even greater surplus of food, and so on. And so you can see with the causal chain, we have, just as I've used that phrase before, that domino effect where one effect becomes the cause of the next effect, and so on and so forth. Now on page 228, you are given a few different scenarios to think of and asked to try to trace the effects of these scenarios. So in the first one, the situation is that you are eating salad at a cafeteria and you notice a green worm on one of your lettuce leaves. So what would be the effect of that event? Would you complain? Would you become sick? Would it throw off the rest of your day? Would it lead to you getting a free lunch because this happened? You might think about all of the possible sequence of things that would happen after finding that worm on your salad. The second example, as you leave your classroom, you trip and break your arm. Okay, well, there are going to be some immediate effects. You might need to ask someone to call an ambulance or need someone to drive you to the doctor. But then there are also going to be long-term effects that you might need to think of. If you break the arm that you write with, is that going to affect your schoolwork? If you're an athlete, is this going to affect your performance or cause you to have to miss some sort of an athletic event? And then the final example, you have been warned many times not to be late to work. You have only 10 minutes to spare as you're driving to work and you get a flat tire. Immediate effect might be that you lose your job. Long-term effect, there might be a positive long-term effect in that you get a better job. There might be a negative long-term effect in that you're unable to find another job and then have problems with financial worries and situations. So as you're thinking about your paper, and if you're looking at writing about the effects of an event, keep in mind that there are those immediate or short-term effects. There are also the long-term effects that we would need to think about. All right, on page 228 and 229, then the next thing that we have is these 4 different statements, and you're asked to figure out what type of an essay each statement would be establishing. Are we looking at an essay that is going to explore causes, or are we looking at an essay that is going to explore effects? And so we start with the first sentence. Most of the problems that plague newly married couples are the direct outgrowth of timidity and pride. The phrasing there, direct outgrowth, tells you that we're looking at timidity and pride as being the causes of these problems. Okay, direct outgrowth of, meaning they stem from or they come from the timidity and the pride. So this would be an essay about causes. Our second sentence, the Marshall Plan was designed to aid the economic recovery of Europe after World War II. So we have the Marshall Plan is designed for a certain reason. That reason is to aid in the economic recovery. So if we want to look at how it did that, we're looking at the effects of the Marshall Plan. What type of aid, how did the recovery play out? Okay, those sorts of ideas. The next example, the smoke from burning poison ivy can bring on a skin rash and lung irritation. So we start with the smoke. It brings on, which means it causes something. So the skin rash and the lung irritation are the effects of the poison ivy. So this would be an essay looking at the effects. And then finally, popularity in high school stems largely from good looks, a pleasing personality, participation in school activities, the right friends, and frequent dates. Stems from is a really good indicator to let you know that good looks, pleasing personality, participation, the right friends, frequent dates are all causes of popularity. And so knowing keywords like phrases like due to or stems from can clue you in and give you a way to be able to introduce the idea of an essay about causes. Okay, so also in chapter 14, then you have a student sample. And this sample is looking at why students drop out of college. And so in the first paragraph, we start by discussing the fact that every fall, many first-year college students begin that they're ready they believe they're ready, they know that college is important, that they need to go, that unfortunately over 30% don't return after the first year. And then we get into the thesis. Some find the academic program too hard, some lack the proper study habits or motivation, others fall victim to the temptations of the college environment, and a large group leave for personal reasons. We are establishing that we are going to look at the causes. We're going to try to explain why students drop out of college after the first year. Now, if we look ahead, the third paragraph has a nice example of writing style in that the first sentence gives us a transition from the cause that was discussed in our first body paragraph to the cause in the second body paragraph. So paragraph 3 begins, like academic shortcomings, poor study habits have their roots in high school, where even average students can often breeze through with a minimum of effort. So now we know that poor study habits is going to be the new topic of our paragraph, but we are establishing some sort of a connection to the previous cause, and we're letting the reader clearly know that we're now moving into discussing a different cause. In paragraph 4, we use a little bit of a causal chain in this, even though we're still focused mainly on the causes of dropping out. We have the poor student motivation, and that because of poor student motivation, they will avoid assignments. Because they've avoided assignments, they stay away from class. Because they stay away from class, they're not prepared when the final comes. And so that paragraph does build a little bit of that domino effect and showing you how it works. But ultimately, the focus of the paragraph is still connected back to the thesis, which is demonstrating why students drop out of college. All right, moving from chapter 14, I want to then go into looking at some samples from other student papers.